All right, well, welcome back to the Chiropractic Podcast. I'm not Tom Owen, but I'm filling in for him today, so I'm excited about it. Haven't been on the podcast for a while. I am Dr. Jeremy Brubaker, and with me today is Dr. Tara Horrall.
Hello.
And I don't know what we'll get into today. We'll kind of see what direction we head, but both of us obviously chiropractors, and both of us started our own practices a number of years ago. And it's funny, Dr. Tara and I were actually at Palmer together. Mm-hmm. And graduated. She was a class or two ahead of me, and so we were kind of cut from the same cloth from that standpoint from school. And I know a lot listening have gone to a lot of different schools, but we were Palmer proud, I guess.
Don't hold it against us.
That's right. So I thought, what would chiropractors, young chiropractors, I mean, both you and I, after starting our offices, had a passion for helping other chiropractors get into practice, because one thing, and I'll give a little bit of maybe history about where I come from, and is my wife and I are both chiropractors. We met at school. We did those, 2 of the 3 things you do at chiropractic college. I don't know if y'all remember this, but they say you're either going to get married, divorce, or have a baby. Well, we did 2 of the 3 of those things in the right order too. So we graduated with a 6-month-old and student loans and a whole lot of enthusiasm to go out there and start practice, like I'm sure a lot of those listening and watching did as well. So, but we found out very quickly that opening a practice was a whole lot. It took a whole lot more than we thought. We interned at a great office, both of us. I don't know if you remember Dr. Burns from Palmer.
Absolutely.
Yep. Becky interned at his office. I interned at another office there in the Quad Cities, just trying to get experience in chiropractic and just thirsty for that, and got into some great offices and got a lot, and thought we knew what we were doing, and maybe that was the arrogance of that time in my life.
Did we go to the same school?
I think so, but it's funny, I knew everything coming out of chiropractic school, and I think 20 years later I know less and less and less every day I move along about life, But our experience was we figured out real quick in about 3 or 4 months. We had no idea how to get this chiropractic thing off the ground. Even with great mentors and great experience, it was a whole different animal. I don't know about you, Dr. Tara, what your experience was, but ours was, we got to a point where my wife and I looked at each other and we said, how are we going to make this happen?
So what was it that made you, what were the things you were struggling with that got you to the point where, at least from what I remember the story, it was your wife, Becky, who said, we're not doing this on our own. We've got to get some help. What were the things that were causing her to pause and say, hey, we need help?
Well, number 1, we were living with my parents.
It was a large pause.
Number 2, we were living with my parents. Number 3, we were living with, it was just true. We were motivated, and my parents are awesome.
Yeah,
they were
sure,
fantastic. And funny thing is, our producer here today is my son, who graduated with us as a 6-month-old and helped start our practice. I don't know how helpful he was, but he's pretty helpful right today. So, but what were the things that caused? It was just a lot. It was everything. Right? If anybody that's watching this has ever opened a practice, you know what I'm talking about. It is the whole. You got to get equipment, which, again, common sense tells you need a place to practice. You need to have equipment to practice with, diagnostics and all that side of it. But then it was, how are we actually going to get people through the door? Right? That realization going, maybe what they told us in school that you just open up and they're going to flock in,
right.
Maybe it doesn't happen that way. And because I had some other docs that I knew that it didn't happen that way, right. And they were struggling. So it was one of those things going, we're probably going to get one shot at doing this. And so that's where my wife said, hey, number 1, we got to get out of your parents' house. And number 2, we need this thing to get off the ground quickly on the front end. So I think that was a motivator for us to find some help. And if I'm ever talking to students, I have a list of the top 10 things I wish I would have known.
Right.
And one on that list is, there's people out there that want to help you. There's mentors that want to come beside you. There's actually good chiropractors out there that really want to see chiropractic and young chiropractors successful. But flip side, there's also the other side of our profession, which I don't know if it's still a terminology, but coming through it was always like chiropractors eat their young, they don't treat them very well. And I think that still a lot happens in associate positions and things like that.
Well, now you're going to start talking about that side of things, and you get into my experience with getting out of chiropractic school. You know, that's what
you had 2 experiences, which is interesting.
I did. The tale of 2 associateships, right?
That's right.
They were completely opposite, totally polar. And, you know, if I hadn't had the first experience, which is actually where I learned about aligned, I might have been one of those people who loved chiropractic, but said, yeah, I'm not really sure that this is for me. Because the second associateship that I had after the first one, where everything ran like a well-oiled machine, patients were excited to be there, they referred, they paid, they got amazing results. I had the exact opposite experience at my next associateship, which should have been chiropractors that I could trust. It was my field doctor, the people that were my chiropractors. And what happened is, within 2 months of starting that associateship, I'd built the practice to 150 patient visits a week, but my paychecks were bouncing every 2 weeks, which is pretty stressful whenever it's weird, but the government wants their money back after you get out of school. Those student loans, they expect to be paid.
Pesky student loans.
And those bills didn't quit coming the paychecks bounced.
There was no, what do they call that nowadays? Income-based repayments. That didn't exist.
No.
We're gonna date ourselves on this,
right?
on
And
this
neither did forgiveness, right? There was no forgiveness of those loans.
That's right.
You were on your own. So, but luckily, like I said, I'd had that first experience where I'd seen aligned, and I thank God I knew where to turn, where chiropractors did care about other chiropractors and did care about their success, and where success was real. Or, like I said, if I thought that was the way my future was going to be, I'm not sure I would have kept at it, even as much as I love chiropractic.
Right. Well, I think that's the case for a lot of our peers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a motivator probably in year 1 or 2 of practice, when we saw our classmates start to leave the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just confused,
right?
Because we'd been pretty successful out of the gate,
mm-hmm.
and because we did eventually get some help, and I still have an aligned shirt on today because
right.
AMC helped us. That was the help that we found, was just a good system, great people, and just how do you do this thing and do it moral, legal, and ethical, and do it at a quality level.
Mm-hmm.
And we started seeing our classmates just drop. I mean, I have a good friend that hasn't been in the profession for 15 years. And it's one of those things going, oh my gosh, all that time and energy and sacrifice,
blood, sweat, and tears
that you put in, and then you still got the financial responsibility on the
right.
backside that's going to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the only way you get out of student loans is to check out.
My dad used to tell me I was worth more dead than alive for that very reason. I guess there was forgiveness with student loans, and
death was it. Not a great option.
No,
not one.
No, not at all.
So, along those lines, just thinking about that was a motivator for us to even sit here and talk today. It's still a motivator to go, man, number one, you need great chiropractors out there.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, the adage of you got to struggle for 4 or 5 years to start a practice just isn't true, number one, and it shouldn't be that way.
You better watch. You're going to push a hot button with the first 5 years or a struggle business. I actually had a friend send me a card whenever I opened my practice, and it said, I know those first 5 years are really tough. Here's a gift card, which was really kind, don't get me wrong. But the fact that that was something that he thought was just a well-known fact, as if, oh, well, you're going to struggle, so sorry about that. That wasn't my experience, but it's still what chiropractic students are being told.
Is that right?
It is. And what I find is maddening about that is that because they're told that they're going to struggle, they just expect it. And when it comes, they just keep getting warmer, like that frog in the boiling water, right? They just keep getting more and more warmer and warmer in that boiling water until there's nothing left of that practice.
See, the good news is I know your personality. If somebody says you're going to struggle, you'll be like, the heck I am. We're going to figure this out.
That's exactly
this
right.
out. But not everybody has
Not
that
today.
personality. So, so what do you think are some things? Why is that? Why would you think that is something that is told to chiropractors or business owners in general? Is it the fact that, I mean, there are tons of studies out there,
Sure.
you know, businesses that make it through 1 year or 2 year or 3 year. And if you make it through 5 years, well, you got a chance to making it to 10.
Right.
I mean, so there are these studies and stats out there that maybe have some validity. But what do you think are some of maybe the top things that you've seen over the years that what would cause somebody to have that conversation, especially with a young chiropractor? I mean,
What would cause them to have the conversation? I mean, I think they feel like they're preparing them for what's to come, maybe warning them, trying to teach them better than they were taught. But the only thing that, I mean, I don't know what's the end game in that. What are the alternatives if you're not going to open a practice? Well, you've got associateships, but we talked about the fact that sometimes that's not
some are good and
right. Exactly.
a lot aren't. I mean,
good
that's
and
just
bad,
reality,
just
yeah.
like everything
Sure.
else. And then beyond that, what else is there? Again, I think the reason is they just don't know any better. And fortunately, you and I had the experience where we found out that by God's grace that there was better, that it didn't have to be that way.
Sure.
But if there's no one telling them,
Yeah, the message isn't there. I mean, it's kind of a parallel to chiropractic in general. I
Sure.
mean, you look at the state of healthcare in our country, and hopefully it improves. I mean, I don't bank on politicians a lot to improve anything about my life.
sure.
But at least when we're recording this, there's maybe some optimism along those lines, maybe. But, it's like getting the message of chiropractic out. So many people are sick and miserable and struggling health-wise, where we sit here and probably with a lot of chiropractors listening to this going, well, we know different, right? It's like common sense to us that healthcare comes from where? Above, down, inside, out, right? You remove interference, we remove disease, and now we have health and vitality that start, the body's designed to be healthy. That is not a message that gets conveyed in health. So that's how I kind of think about this same topic with starting a practice or opening a practice. It's just people that don't know any better. I mean, you go into any allopathic office, you're not going to get that message probably, right? Maybe a holistic practitioner, but you're not going to get that message. So everybody expects to be what?
Sick.
And I need antibiotics or I need some sort of intervention. That's just the expectations.
Right.
So do you think is that a decent parallel to draw of going, I mean, that's just kind of what society thinks and how they're wired. So then that gets just, conveyed.
Live up to those expectations.
Correct. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
When we're talking chiropractic, though, we know different.
Right.
And so I think when we jump over here to when we're talking about practicing and we're talking about starting a practice or being successful in practice, we know different, right?
Right.
We know different than what everybody else is going to say about business, and you got to struggle for 5 years because honestly, we didn't. Now, was it easy?
Sure. No.
Oh.
It was work.
You
It
go
was
from
a lot of
nothing.
work.
You go from nothing to something. I don't care who you are. If you
Right.
ever get somebody telling you the building something from nothing is easy, it's not easy. But you get to. I was talking with a doc earlier today, and we were talking about choosing your hard, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard that term, but
Well, you can do it easy on the front side and it's hard later. That sort of the versus.
that's right.
On the front side, which
There's
makes
a
it
quote
easy
that
later.
I won't even
Right.
try to misquote, but that's essentially what it is. I mean,
Right.
you can have an easy, but long term it's going to be hard. You do the hard stuff early, well then you do the hard and the right stuff. So you can do a lot of hard things and do it poorly,
Right.
and it'll still be hard. But I think there's some thoughts on that as well. So it just doesn't have to be that way.
Well, I think some of the mistakes that people make in starting practices, some of those things are not they're not difficult. They are common sense. They are simple, but they're not things. I remember sitting in my first meeting with Dr. Owen teaching, and I remember thinking, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And it was common sense, which is one of the things that I liked about it. But just because it was common sense, and I had a lot of common sense, they were still things that I never would have thought of on my own. They were simple. The principles were simple, but it still wasn't something that I was just going to pull out of my hat on, on my own volition. And, a lot of the things that cause people to struggle, they don't have to. Choosing a market doesn't have to be hard. Choosing a good market doesn't have to be hard. I think we chiropractors make it hard. We make it difficult on ourselves.
Or like me, you don't even think about it. You just go to where your family is.
Woohoo,
done. That's my market research. All right, we're going to be, not always great.
Yeah, that is one way to. Sometimes that works, right?
Sure. I mean, it worked, but it was work. We did not go to a good market. Had I known what I know, right? It's like anything else. So hindsight's always very, very clear. Had I known what actually makes a good place to practice market-wise, we probably would have went somewhere different. It's just true. But but you can still make it happen. But it's kind of like the old paddling upstream. Like when can you stop paddling if you want to keep? If you stop paddling, you start going the other direction. That was our experience in our little small town market. So,
if you, like I said, I've looked a lot of times at those top 5 or 6 things. There's a lot, like you said, there's lots of statistics out there about those first 5 years and what causes businesses to have problems. But that market is generally number 1 on there, not doing enough market research. Another's not asking for enough, not preparing their business plan enough to the point, and understanding really how much operating capital, how much opening expense it was going to take. And they ran out of money too quickly. That's difficult.
That's one of the, when you look at numbers, that's one of the biggest reasons companies go out of business. They're undercapitalized.
Right.
They just can't get through the tough stuff at the beginning. And if you're on a shoestring, there's a lot of stress and pressure. But go back to, you said something about common sense. Things that, and it's probably true that common sense is relatively uncommon. You've heard that said. Statements are around for a while because they're true, right? Common sense, especially you look around, not a lot of common sense. And even I got a lot of advice from people, opening a practice, and they meant well, and it may have, it made sense. It made sense, but in this chiropractic, there's this little subset. Every business has a little subset of, I don't call them rules, but just nuances.
Sure.
That make, and chiropractic is no different. The business principles fit, but chiropractic's unique in a lot of different ways. Especially in the healthcare industry, you don't get a referral network coming out of school, right? Those things don't exist. You're an educated entrepreneur, which, looking back, like to you and I, it's just common sense now, right? It's just like, well, yeah, you've got to market, you've got to communicate, you've got to relate with patients, you've got to hire and manage staff and be a good boss. And I don't remember any of that.
None of that was in school.
None of that. It was in school.
Right.
Maybe if you came in with a business degree or a management degree coming in, but most of us came in with sciences, science degrees, right? Where that was all. And that was one of the things when we were opening our practice, was like things that should have been common sense. Like I should have thought of that, right?
Right.
In an office, like you've been in lots of offices over the years as a kid. There's staff, there's lights, there's chair, right? There's overhead, there's you've got to actually communicate with people. And I think that's oftentimes a misconception in our profession, is what profession we're actually in too, right? And everybody would say, in chiropractic and healthcare.
The healthcare business.
But the real profession we're in is what?
The people business.
We're in the people business. And so Yeah, which I may have changed my mind if I knew that. I'm like the introvert in the
And
corner.
I'm out.
I'm okay. Like I may have gone a different route. I have to communicate with people all the time. I love to help people, but so I was able to overcome that. But just a lot of those common sense things now were just totally foreign in that process, and it just wasn't a skill set. And how do you learn a skill set? Well, you've got to be trained. I mean, if you want to do it well, I mean,
Right.
a lot of us, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I do a lot, probably to my fault. Like I'll try anything, I'll do any. But there is a point where you go, I need an expert. I need somebody to come alongside, because I mean, you think about it. In this day and age, you've got $300,000-$400,000 in student loans. Even conservatively, if you're going to get an office with a decent footprint set up, I mean, you're going to be 70, 80, 90, 100,000 conservatively.
Well, and if you consider a situation like yours, you had 2 student loans, right? So
Oh,
now
yeah,
just double it.
We doubled up on that bad boy.
Double down.
The only good part of that, if there's the interest rates were very favorable,
Right.
they're not so much now,
No.
right? So
That 2% just isn't.
it doesn't
not what it used to be.
exist now. But yes, there's a lot, and that common sense mentality, man. When you're under that stress and pressure, you're not thinking about common sense. It's like survival mode.
Right.
So I wanted to go back there just to go, okay, Dr. Terry, give us some common sense things, just some quick common sense things that maybe that you take for granted, I take for granted now, but when we communicate with students or docs starting their practice, or even docs who've been practicing 20 years, is some of those things that we're like, doesn't everybody know this? They don't. It's like, I'll go back to that parallel of just how to be healthy. Most society thinks they know. They have no idea what it really takes to be healthy, or especially in the United States, we wouldn't be ranking
Right.
39 and 40th out of 40, spending most,
The absolute.
we spend the
highest.
most on our healthcare per capita, and yet we rank pretty much towards the bottom. Something's not working there. There's no common sense happening
Right.
in that process. So as we're thinking about practicing and opening practices, what are some common sense things that, get down to the basement here, down the bottom shelf, some things that we would go, okay, here's some things that were not common sense to me in that process. I can add to it. I'll put you on the spot.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I can think of it in terms of opening a practice. I can think of it in terms of just practicing altogether. Which would you prefer?
It's an open forum.
Okay. You have no preference. I've got it. So I remember sitting in that class with Dr. Owen. I remember one of the mind-blowing things was like action reaction, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the way that works in communication with patients, that was something that was profound to me at that point. It's common sense. It's great to see you. It's great to see you too.
Right.
It's common sense, but it's something that until pointed out, I would never have considered on my own.
Right. So, and I was going to say that wasn't that Newton, but I don't think it was. Action reaction. Einstein, I don't know, but things
Right.
That every effect has a cause.
Sure.
Every cause has an effect. I think maybe.
But put into communication, that was something.
But does it relate with?
Right.
But when you step back and think about it, we experience it every day.
Right.
We experience it all the time. Right. You say something nice about somebody and smile at somebody, there's a reaction. If I say something negative about you and give you the dirty look, I am going to, I can pretty much count on what.
It's predictable.
It's predictable. It's a principle. It just is. So that's one thing I love about principles is that they're always true. And if it's not true, guess what?
It's not a principle.
It's not a principle, right? It's not consistent. I think was it Sid Williams who always used the keys analogy. He's like, what happens when he'd hold the keys up,
Mm-hmm.
like if you ever went to DE or anything of that nature. And they maybe still do it, but every time, what happens when you drop the keys?
They fall.
Why? Because there's this principle called gravity,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter you believe that principle or not.
Right.
You get up on top of where we're sitting in this building, and you jump off the edge.
Gonna hit the ground.
You're pretty much going one way, right? So, and that's I love when you can meld in principles to business and chiropractic. Chiropractic is principles. It just is. I think, again, there's something called the 33 principles. I don't think a lot of our students know there are principles
Right.
that were laid out by the founders of chiropractic, developers of chiropractic. The guys that put this together. They were more right than, you always hear evidence-based chiropractic. Is it evidence-based? Is it scientific? It really is. They were onto it 100
Right.
years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that a lot of what they talked about, it keeps getting proved and proved and proved again and again. So it's just kind of fun. So back to some common sense things when starting a practice or building a practice is just people relators. Just common sense principles that if you're not exposed to them, they're not common.
Now, you said you're a people person, but maybe not at that point. We're not so into just communication and having to talk to people consistently. That's what you said a minute ago, right?
Oh, I put off, everybody in undergrad, you take a speech class at some point.
Sure.
Is that still true? It could be.
I don't know.
You never took one? Well, I waited.
I don't know if it's still true.
I waited till the last semester because I was so scared of communicating or making a fool of myself. It's probably really what it was. Obviously, I've gotten way over that. I make a fool of myself quite consistently.
I make a point of it, in fact.
I open my
a day.
mouth and remove all doubt, right? That's the way it works.
Principle.
No, so to your point, yes, very introverted, very, very okay with that too. But that's a challenge when you're in the people business, right?
So how did you overcome that? You said you learned past it. How did you do it?
It wasn't easy, to be honest with you. But then it was, because when you get, again, if you're practicing now, there's a certain satisfaction of seeing sick people get well, right? And seeing people get their lives back. And as you start to be able to see that happen, and you start to get kind of past yourself, where you start to realize, hey, this really isn't about me and my insecurities or feeling like a fool or thinking I'm going to, all of a sudden you get to that point going, yeah, I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. And so that was one thing. Another thing that really got me past that was we're sitting here, on an Aligned, the Chiropractic Podcast. Well, a lot of that came from Aligned, is I was equipped with the tools, the principles. I mean, we're talking principles.
Right.
Most of those I've learned, like you have, being around Aligned for a long time. So I think it was the fact that I was equipped. And the things that I was doing and saying and communicating were proven, and they just worked, right? And if I got behind it and actually did, it's like anything else in life, right? You can go out and try and reinvent the wheel if you want, but if you look around, there's a lot of wheels. Like, why would you go do that? You just go get yourself a wheel, right? And I think it's the same way we're talking about chiropractic, starting chiropractic off. It's the same way. Like, you want to go do it? Go do it. Or you find a success and you follow it. Lots of good quotes here today. Right? I have no independent thought. I just learn from others, implement, and let's go. Right? Let's do it. So I think that was the thing that got,
why would you?
And got it over for me was in communicating, especially with people. Was we always did a healthcare class. We were taught to do a healthcare class every Monday or Tuesday, whenever the day was, and just getting in front of your patients and communicating. And that's the fun part. When you love like chiropractic or you love helping people, then you can talk about it.
Right.
It's not a stressor to talk chiropractic. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not for those listening, right? Just talk chiropractic. The more you talk about chiropractic, the more you can talk about chiropractic, the more you can talk with people. And then now you can talk with more people. and then you can communicate the message. Because that's another aspect. Common sense, I should have known that I'm going to have to go market. I'm going to have to go communicate this, because chiropractic is not, I think it's better, maybe a little better than it was 20 years ago. People more receptive, at least, but still don't have a clue about what chiropractic does. I mean, neck pain, headaches, low back, but is that really what we're here doing? Get great results with that, sure.
Right.
But what are we really doing? So how do we communicate that? Is really where I found that I was able to get past, the wallflower in the corner type mentality.
Yeah, that was really, I guess, something that I didn't understand. You didn't know what you didn't know, right? In chiropractic school, I guess I didn't. It's not that I didn't know that I was going to have to talk about it, but I didn't realize how ill-equipped I was to speak about chiropractic in a way that people actually could understand.
I know exactly where you're going.
And be able to not just understand, but then be able to get on board with and move forward with. That was totally a foreign concept for me, and something that, like I said, luckily I learned by coming to Aligned. But yeah, I was clueless.
Well, that's to your point. Just how do you communicate with people? What will people remember? They're not going to remember definitions from Grey's Anatomy or.
Every chiropractor wants to be a teacher on someone's first visit or second. Yeah.
I mean, doctor does mean teacher in Latin or something of that nature. But the reality is, how do you do that? I was never taught that. And,
I was taught some things.
What
I was.
What stories to tell and what motivates people and what, just all, people skills. And some are very blessed with that. Some are just people, and they can communicate. But most of us, that's a learned skill. Some of us are still learning, right? Ongoing. But I know we're
job training.
On the job training. So I know we're kind of coming up on probably time for this episode, and I have no idea what we talked about. It was a good time talking about chiropractic, and whether we're opening practices or just talking about healthcare and how changing people's lives. But some of those common things that were so uncommon to us, 15, 20 years ago when we started in this profession, and now it's the same. It kind of repeats itself. We have a group of young doctors. So if you're listening to this and a young doctor, man, you need to find yourself a great mentor, a great one that'll take you under their wing and kind of walk the path with you. I mean, that's what I found. I had great mentors. Obviously, I had great mentors inside of Aligned as well that I'm still very, very thankful for, which have not just affected my life in chiropractic, but again, I've got a 21-year-old on the other side of the microphone here. His life is different. I know it is. The way he thinks, the concepts he has about life and business or communicating with people are different. Because why? Because I got equipped. I understood it and I was able to implement it and be successful with it. So, got any final thoughts here before we sign off for this week?
Final thoughts. Are there ever any final thoughts? Like you said, I mean, there are all kinds of chiropractors, I'm sure, listening to this podcast at this point. But if you're in, let's go this direction. If you're not in practice yet, or if you're in the first 5 years, understand that chiropractic practice doesn't need to be a struggle. If you're outside of the first 5 years, chiropractic practice doesn't need to be a struggle. If I could tell chiropractors everywhere something, that would be it. It doesn't have to be a grind. It doesn't have to be a struggle. There are people who want to help. There is hope. You have the ability to be successful. You just need the tools to make it happen. And luckily, we had the blessing of being here. And I think back about where I would be if I hadn't had that first associateship, if I hadn't found out about it first. And I hate to think the people who didn't have that experience and are struggling because of it. So those are my closing thoughts. It doesn't have to be a struggle. if you find yourself not even having as much fun as you should be,
Sure.
man, there's no reason for that either. Chiropractic is fun.
That's right. Well, Dr. Tara, this has been a blast. Love sitting chatting with you. Hopefully listeners got a little bit out of this today, and we're just going to sign off. Thanks for listening to the Chiropractic Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.